are going to use these bird transfers and do some interesting things on cards. Maybe not sure this bird would totally. Actually, it will. So we'll do one that's totally on, one that's sort of off, one that's sort of, and then do the other thing with a smaller bird, sort of in the middle, and then this one. We can decide how much of a bird we want. Probably like that. I do like it when it's a little hanging off a little bit. But anyway, we will get the transfers onto the cards, basically. These are new, so I'm going to be a little careful. I'm using bristle paper, so I'm not waxing it, but obviously you could if you wanted more insurance against sticking. Sort of get the idea of where we want this. I'll leave this one sort of traditional center kind of look, I think. And because there's some extra hanging off here, you can actually just stick it down to the cutting mat, which is nice because that saves you worrying about it moving around too much, especially with things to come later. The other thing you can do is do the transfer in reverse and then just put down the card on top of it. Except I didn't do it correctly, but you can do it that way too. What I'm doing here will likely make sense in a minute. This one I think I'll keep more towards the bottom. And you can also use these grid lines to line it up. I will put this sort of bottom, but mostly off, I think. Oops. Okay, so we got these guys down in various states of being birds. And I am going to use my mini spatulas because I like them a lot. And we're going to kind of do... I'm going to sort of, I guess not randomly, but, we're going to sort of dab on the bird, right? We're going to make it, and I'm going to sort of finger blend on this. I'm going to leave this bird very yellow. I think this bird I'll do a little... And there's no really right or wrong way, because we're just sort of, playing with this stuff. And the lunar paste does dry a bit quicker, I would say, than actual chalk paste if you're used to using that with these transfers. I'm going to do, this will be mostly a blue bird. And this will... If you get multiple colors on this, be a little careful picking up new color, just because you don't necessarily... All these colors work really well together, but, you don't want to make a huge mess if you can avoid it. So we're pretty good with green. So that's why I have spatulas for each of these, which is kind of a thing I like doing anyway. Wow, that's way too much. That's a lot, so we can sort of like with chalk paste, like you don't need a ton, especially if it's, you know, an area that is kind of off. And I have no idea how any of these will come out, so that's the other reason that doing a bunch of these can be nice. Just because, you know, if something weird happens. All these colors pretty much go well together, so if something a little weird happens, we can, you know, throw out that card or redo it or whatever. Also, this does kind of lead to something of a mess. Let me just grab a towel. We need a couple, actually. I want to put one here for these guys. I'm going to recover this. Another one I may need for my hand. So basically what you're going to do is just sort of smush them all together. It's kind of like, it's essentially like smush painting, only with transfers and birds. And, you know, here, as you can see, I got a little outside of the transfer, which isn't quite what I was going for, but we'll work with it, because basically this stuff is pretty forgiving. You may be able to get that off with water, we'll see. I'm going to switch to a second finger, since these are much more blue dominant, and the originals were sort of green and gold. And we just sort of do that. And as we have extra, we make sure if anything feels like it's not fully done, we are good. That's pretty much it. Now we get to do the fun sort of peel and reveal part. And it's good to peel these off. We're making a slight mess here, but it's good to peel these off pretty fast. Basically, we don't really want the paste to dry in the transfer. I rolled this one a little bit, but, and you can, that one we also got a little oddness on. That one is very cool. And we'll see about this one. So we are back with our 4 cards that we did earlier. And I just thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about what happens when things don't go quite right. Now, this one is pretty much perfect. No weird messes. Like, all we really need to do is put a sentiment on it and we're done. This one has a little spot off to the side, which we can do a couple different things with. This one's a good candidate for just sort of cutting it off and then cutting down the panel, which I'll do with that guy. This guy, because they're fairly faint marks and it's just sort of at one edge, this is a good candidate for using something like a border, so I'm going to use this tape on there. I think it'll go well. Like, this green to me matches this green pretty well. Plus, it's sort of a pink Eastery color. And then this guy is more of a challenge, because the line is sort of right here in the middle. What actually caused this is there was a cut line on the transfer that I chalked over. Anyway, and you can see glitter. My hits from earlier. So this one we're probably going to want to put a sediment over in some way or another to sort of cover that up. Alternatively, you could cover this with white paste, acrylic paint, whatever. You know, we could just cover this, but I'm gonna go with the 3 ways I usually try and handle this, which are either cutting down the panel, covering it over, or just taping it off on the side. But before we get started, I think we need a good bit of Easter sentiment. Like the spring is sprung here, and also sending you cheer. I think sending you cheer will work great on this bird card. And I like spring is sprung, although I'm going to have to grab a slightly different panel because I don't think I have anything that's quite the right size out, but that's easy enough to fix. So let's print off a couple of this guy, and then we can look for another card panel. So sending you cheer. Let's sort of make sure we're lined up. That is super, and then we'll pick it up with the door and then reposition this guy. We can put the magnet a little closer. And what do we need? We probably need some ink. Maybe not the huge ink pad, because that'll be sort of tricky to ink this whole stamp with. We can look for something maybe a little more Easter friendly too. Let's see what we got. What's something? Ooh. Let's do this. That's a really nice vibrant purple. And maybe for the other sentiment, we'll do that blue. Those look like Easter colors to me. So get this guy off. This is pretty pigmented ink, so I tend to be a little careful. You can always re-ink, of course, with the benefit of one of these tools. And you can just do this with your hand. You can also use a air hockey puck, or they make special tools for doing that. Sending you cheer. The sending is a little weak, so I'm going to hit that again, because that's the whole point of these things, is that you can re-ink, and there we go. Perfect. I guess I should say the other cool benefit of these guys, and all we have to do is cut that out. That'll be exactly wide enough, so we'll just cut it on either side, and then just so that sort of have equal matting. And I will grab my other one of this side, my other piece of scrap, and we will re-ink. And same deal, it comes down a little faint the first time, so doing it twice is a good option. And that's why these sort of stamp positioning tools can kind of take someone who's okay and make them look like they're a really awesome stamper, because you can get very vibrant things. So those are good. We probably want to work well for a larger bird. Also, either of these two guys. This one will work really. I think I'll just do one of the spring is sprung. Sometimes getting these off is kind of interesting. The ink on these won't actually discolor anything in the future, just as an FYI. And of course you can use cleaning tools if you so choose to get the ink off the stamp. I don't mind if my stamps look kind of used, but you know, like most things, it's a personal preference. So I'm going to go and grab the spring is sprung. We will hang on to that on the side for a minute because we need an actual piece of card to print on. Let me see if I usually go to my scrap pile first, and we have right on top something pretty perfect. A fairly big piece, which is essentially the other half of the some of the card blanks that we made, to put the magnet close so this whole thing doesn't get picked up. Do this, pick up the stamp. Actually, that's upside down. Want it the other way so we can read it. There we go. That's better. Well, I guess we won't use blue because this had a little, I got a little ink on this, the purple, but that's fine. I like this color quite a bit, so it'll all work out. Now if you print it once, you basically get that sort of like, you can still see the paper texture through it. So whether or not you like that is just a personal preference. I'm doing it a second time because I tend to like it to be a little more saturated, but that's just me. So just pick this up, and we're done making assignments for a while, so I will put this to the side, grab our cards, and I will also grab trusty A2 card blanks so that we can figure out what color cards we want eventually. And let's start finishing. I'll let those dry and finish these off. So the first one we were going to do is this guy, which we can just sort of cut this piece off. So I tend to want to, that's not going to be far enough. So that is going to be at 4.5, and that should get rid of it. There we go. And this is the piece. You can still save it if you want to use it. And just to get a sense of how this will look, if I grab, let's grab a very vibrant card. It's Easter. It's a pretty nice vibrant color. Yeah, I'm just sort of seeing how these would look, right? So I could make this, I could add a little more extra space, but that's going to put this, that might be okay if we cut off the excess. I think this will look better if we leave it the way it is. And I am going to cut it there. There we go. You can also, of course, cut this with a paper cutter if you want it to be super square. Then I am going to grab my detail scissors, and I want to cut basically under this cheer line just to give a little more space around the bird and such. I will get rid of that piece because I think that'll look better. And the other thing we can do is, since we're doing that kind of cutting, we can just come in and do a similar thing here. And you can get as detailed with this as you want, obviously. One nice thing about using ink for these sediments is it dries really quickly. So I think that looks great. So I'm just going to tack that down with a little bit of glue. The other option here is that you could mount it on foam if you prefer that kind of look. I don't think it's going to take much because we're basically gluing paper to paper, but we can get this together and let it dry whilst we work on other things. The mono glue, this mono aqua gives you a little time to work, but not a ton, so there we go. We will leave that guy off to the side. I do like the idea of sort of a more vibrant look. This one, I think I will stay more square. And these longer scissors are just very good for cutting very square type things because they're very good at cutting in a straight line. I like this sitting here, about here. This one, of course, doesn't really require much touching up. And just to sort of show you the difference, you can also use the bottom end, which I don't usually do, but it gives you more, it allows you to cover a wider area more easily, and with a pretty thin layer where the detailed tip tends to, I don't know, just sort of push more stuff around. These are fairly straightforward. I mean, these are pretty simple cards. I'm going to weight this guy down just so that the glue adheres, because the lunar paste makes these cards curl a little bit more than otherwise. And then we have, you can move the paper cutter out of the way. And this guy is the one where we're gonna use some of this great spring tape that actually came in my Countdown to Spring box from Tea Thoughts. The owner of Tea Thoughts actually designs her own washi tape, so that makes this stuff even more special. And I just line this up with the edge, and if it's a little long, that's fine, because we're just going to tuck it under anyway. And I very much like how that looks. We'll do it on this side too. And because this is semi-transparent, you can see this blue mark if you look really carefully, but I mean, I think the overall look, you can't really tell too much. So, this is basically done. So, what color? I think a nice sunshine yellow, perhaps. And this is going to be a very minor offset. I kind of like that. Also, make sure you know what direction your cards are before you start taping stuff down, because it is challenging once you do it the wrong way. Although, there are fixes for that too, so if we ever wind up doing it, I'll show you a couple of those. So, you know, sort of the same process we've used before, which is just put a bunch of tape runner on the back and guesstimate the center here. And I wound up being a little crooked. We'll see if we can, yeah, It's hard to peel this up once it's down. But, you know, that's okay. Like how this looks, very, you know, very simple, straightforward. That guy is done. Let's look at our first card, because it might be fully glued at this point. It's a little, like, I don't think it's moving anywhere, so I think we're good to tape this one down as well. And if you ever get a situation where, like, the tape's totally not working and it starts to peel up, you can either live with it, or if you really want to change it, one of the best ways to do that is you can just cut the whole front panel off and remount it pretty easily. And this guy is done, ready to send Cheer out into the world. And we will work on this one, which, you know, we're basically going to do almost the same thing, although I'm going to let this one mat a little bit more, because I want to sort of mount it in the middle, but I also want to make sure I'm covering up the thing I was trying to cover up. There we go. Just for an alternate, you can do this guy with tape. And you can see this is actually the piece of paper we were worried about initially. So, yeah, you can see how you can take stuff that you thought was going to be a problem and, you know, use it in a whole different way. There we go. Now, this is sort of the similar issue of you can either go in oops. Well, I jacked that all up. So, here's a fix for that. We are going to trim this on a trimmer, because that'll make this a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier to cut a straight line, essentially. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying, I'm going to try here and see how this looks. Because when in doubt, there we go. That's perfectly fine. See? Problem solved. Sometimes my scissor game is not super awesome. But since this guy is a darker color, let's use one of our more navy cards, I think, just to sort of mix this up. I really am enjoying having a very large tape roller. You kind of get the idea of the sort of colors we're working with. And this guy, as you can see, like if you feel this, you can feel that this is a little damp. So that's why this paper is like seizing a little bit. You can wait for it to totally dry. That will prevent the possibility of the tape lifting off. But we didn't use that much glue, so I don't think it's a huge risk. Oh, let's use a color we haven't used before. Something. I had a purple. Oh, a green would be nice. How about a nice green? Always a fan of slightly non-traditional colors when it comes to this sort of stuff. Because, you know, but I mean, like, this kind of green is almost traditional for spring type things. So, got that nicely adhered. You can see I did a nice job turning my fingers purple, too. Rubbing alcohol takes that off really well, in case that ever happens to you. So, there is our finished set of 4 spring cards.